So, welcome to this webinar of What's Your Pharmacy Worth Part 2. And this came, so we had hundreds of you guys on the first webinar and probably another 100 of you like sign up for the recording afterwards. And I got a lot of questions and they started rolling in. I got behind, I did some traveling. We went to Mexico with our inner circle group and I just got way far behind and I felt really bad because I like answering your guys' questions and I don't want to leave you hanging. So put together this part 2, which is Q&A. So all of these questions came from you guys. I will say we got about 100 questions and they obviously fell into some groupings, and that's what I'm answering. So if you don't see your specifically worded question, it's because I combined it with 10 other people that had the same question. And if there's something I missed or some nuance that you want to perk up and bring up on here, like feel free to do that. Use the chat, use the Q&A tab. Either one, I will check that, and I will do my best to answer as much. I will say, disclaimer, I am not a lawyer. I am not an attorney. I'm not a CPA. I'm not any of those things. So none of this is legal or financial advice. This is just me sharing my experience and my expertise because I have bought and sold a lot of pharmacies, actually hoping to buy some more. There's 3 that I'm really excited that, fingers crossed, I get to buy. So, all right, we are going to dive in. So part 2, what's your pharmacy worth? Welcome. I am Dr. Lisa Faast. You probably know me because you were probably on part 1. If you weren't on part 1 or didn't happen to see that, we will send out the recording for part 1 when we send out the recording for this one. So we'll just go ahead and include it. And if you want to contact us, this is all my contact information. Let's go ahead and get going. All right. So what is your pharmacy worth? Part 1, just to recap, we talked about deep dive into how to calculate using different methods. I've heard from a ton of you that was extremely helpful, based off your financials, based off your volume, those kinds of things. We also overviewed ways to increase your pharmacy's valuation, because if you're wondering what your valuation is, you probably want it to be as high as possible. So those are some of the things that we talked about in part 1. So part 2 is all about the questions. So it's pure Q&A time. I sent out a couple of emails, probably annoyed the heck out of you, but I wanted to give everybody a chance to submit questions. So we had a bunch of people submit questions. If you have some live, happy to take them live as long as we have time. If not, I can, hopefully I answer your question on the webinar as we go through them. So Q&A. Location, location, location. I had several people reach out that says, doesn't the location of my pharmacy help improve the value? Where's that factored in? Is it really financials? And the answer to that is yes and no. Okay, so if your pharmacy has a prime location, corner of Main Street and First Street kind of thing, that location, the benefits of that location should show in your financials, should show through your financials. And so yes, it matters if you're tucked away in a medical building where nobody can find you and it's really hard parking and those kinds of things. That crappy location is going to show through in your financials. And so yes, location matters, but really it comes down to business performance. Now, I will say I started to get a lot of questions, and there's kind of a divergence of what your pharmacy is worth. Many of you that are pharmacy owners that own your building and you own your business, you see those connected as one, where they're actually very 2 different things. You might sell your pharmacy business and keep the real estate, and you want to be a real estate mogul and you just want to, rent out real estate. You could sell your real estate and keep the pharmacy business. And so they are not married together, even though you might think of them that way. So when selling real estate, of course, location matters. The condition of the building matters. The property taxes and all those kinds of things, that matters when selling your building. However, all that I'm talking about in terms of what's your pharmacy worth has nothing to do with any physical real estate. Those real estate determinations would be by a real estate agent. I would, commercial real estate agent. So for example, I mentioned that I'm hoping to buy some pharmacies. 2 of those pharmacies are being also sold with the property and with the location. And so I don't have any way to value that property. I have no idea. So I'm hiring and paying a commercial real estate agent to give me a consultant on evaluation of that. So what we are talking about, what I talked about in part one, and what we're going to continue to talk about in part two, is the business part, okay, which is not married to your building. So does location matter for the business? Not really, because you can move a business wherever you want. Now, certainly there's steps you have to follow and things that you need to do, but business is not tied to just one location. And if you have prime location, hopefully that prime location is showing through in your financials. You've got lots of foot traffic and you sell lots of OTCs and those kinds of things. So location, yes and no, doesn't really matter. So hopefully that answers your question for a lot of you that kind of reached out about location, building type, building size, building condition, those kinds of things. All right. So talking a little bit, going down this on the condition of the building and the demographics. My pharmacy is in a really good neighborhood. My pharmacy is not in a great neighborhood. My pharmacy is in a medical building. My pharmacy is in a residential place. Like all of those kinds of questions, my exact same answer is yes, those things matter because they should impact your ability to attract patients, to attract foot traffic, to attract repeat business. And so that repeat business and that foot traffic should show on your financials. So when you're evaluating the business side of the pharmacy, you're not really concerned. But if you use those advantages maximally, then hopefully that's coming through on your financials. So hopefully that answers the questions like good neighborhoods, bad neighborhoods, old people neighborhoods, new people neighborhoods. Like no, that really matters because technically a pharmacy business can be moved anywhere. Like we'll talk a little bit about buying licenses. You can buy licenses and move the pharmacy, move the license. And so hopefully that answers those questions. All right. I got a lot of questions about how do you evaluate pharmacy with contracts only, with no business. And you might be thinking, well, why in the heck would you be buying or selling that? So this happens a lot, especially in heat zones. So in Texas, we have some heat zones. And so many people will sell licenses and contracts. They will go through all the work of getting a license, getting all the contracts, and then they will just sell the contracts. Now, sometimes I actually looked at a pharmacy like this not too long ago. I ended up not buying it. But he opened for business, did all the stuff, and then 9 months later, his personal circumstances changed and he didn't want to own it anymore. So he really didn't have any business. He filled I think 10 prescriptions a day, maybe not even that. And so he was looking to just sell his licenses and contracts. So what those are worth very much depends on your location. So this is where your location is, because if you're in a heat zone, and you already have active contracts, then that is very, very valuable because a lot of times there's waiting periods. Some heat zones, there's 6 months, some are 1 year, some are 2 year. I've even heard a couple 3 years where you have to be in business before the contract will be given to you. And so what you're doing is you are buying down your time. So if somebody's already done the waiting, so to speak, the year waiting or the 2 year waiting, then what you're doing is you're buying access, and that's worth something. So if you're in a hotly contested heat zone, I've heard of licenses and contracts, obviously depends which contracts, for which PBMs, going for 100,000, 150. I've even heard 200,000 in places where there are some places where licenses are taking 6 and 9 months. So what you're doing is you're buying down that time. Most of the time, for example, in the area that I was looking at, which is the greater DFW area, we weren't in a heat zone. There are some heat zones and there's some Optum, just so you know, there's some secret Optum heat zones out there that I've learned with a lot of contracting recently. And those licenses and contracts, honestly, were probably worth about 30, 40 grand at the most. I don't know if he ever sold. I offered him, an offer lower than that. He didn't want to take it, which was perfectly fine. So, most of the time, contracts and licenses and not a heat zone, probably somewhere between 20 to 40,000, just depending on how long it takes. I'm speaking with one of my inner circle members who's in DC, and she called the DC board, and to get a new license was like a matter of weeks. So if you're selling a license where it just takes a couple of weeks to get a new license, there's not much value in that. But if you're selling a license where it takes 9 months to get a license, there's some value in that. So hopefully that helps you with understanding the contracts and the the insurances, and taking over the licenses, is basically what you're doing. All right. What about brokers? So I had a big tranche of questions about brokers. So we're going to break these down because there was a lot of questions. All right. So brokers, are they good? Are they bad? Are they worth it? This is going to come down to a lot of like your experience, your comfortability. I have now been a part of a lot of pharmacy transactions that I don't really need a broker to hand hold me through the process. I still work with a lot of brokers to like find pharmacies, like these 3 pharmacies I'm considering buying. I found them all through my relationships with brokers. So they definitely can be worth it. They can help promote your pharmacy if you are wanting to sell. They're kind of like real estate agents, you know, in that sense. Like the first time you buy a house, like you're so scared, you don't know what you don't know. And so that real estate agent is literally like a lifeline. Same in pharmacy. If you're buying your first pharmacy, you've never done it before, you've never seen that, you know, behind the curtain of all that kind of stuff, like I think they're definitely worth their money. Absolutely. And there's some bad ones out there, and I don't mean bad like shady or scammy. Honestly, I haven't really ran across a lot of those, but there's some that are like a little better at vetting financials than others. There's some that are a little better at like promotion than others. So there's definitely some, and I would definitely talk with many before you sign up with one, just like a regular real estate agent is, you know. And so I want you to plant in your head like a pharmacy broker is kind of like a real estate agent. So talk with different real estate agents. You want to really like them. You want to get their philosophy. You want to understand how they work and make sure that it jives like with you. So overall, I think they're good. Definitely worth it if you're inexperienced. The more experienced you get with pharmacy buying, the less you need to rely on them. Same thing with like real estate. Like if you've bought 10 houses, like the chances of a real estate agent being super helpful for you, they're probably just a referral source and those kinds of things. So definitely, I think good, depending on the level of experience. Do you always need a broker? So no, you do not have to use a broker. It is not like a requirement. A lot of people had this mythology in their head that you had to use a broker in order to buy or sell a pharmacy. And that is not the case. You do not have to use a broker. And if you're selling to a chain, do you need a broker? I say no. This is one area where I don't think they would be helpful, but I will put asterisks on this. Okay, here's my asterisk. If you suck at negotiating, if you don't feel comfortable negotiating, then hire somebody else to negotiate for you. I will say when I sold my first pharmacy, I sold it to a chain. I am a terrible negotiator, right? Like you never want me negotiating for cars. You never want me to go, like I feel uncomfortable negotiating. And so when I was selling my pharmacy, I actually had my mentor who basically did all the negotiating for me. So he kind of acted as my broker. If you are not a negotiator and if you're not willing to play tough balls, then I would hire a broker to do the negotiating for you and make sure that you're basically hiring your muscle to do the negotiating. But otherwise, if you're selling to a chain, it's a very standard procedure, very standard process in the sense of like, how the transfer of everything goes. They pretty much walk you through it. The only piece of that I will put on there is negotiating. Because I will tell you, in my experience, when I sold to a chain, now this was many, many years ago, I've only sold to independents for the last decade or more, but their initial offer, we 2.5 times their initial offer through negotiation. So it was worth 7 figures to negotiate with the chain. So not so sure that's, doable obviously nowadays, but hey, always negotiate, right? The answer is no, unless you ask. That's what my husband says. So I would use a broker in any case where you want to negotiate. And if you're a crappy negotiator and you know that, then hire somebody else to do that uncomfortable work for you. Otherwise, I think selling to a chain, if you're a good negotiator and you're happy with the price, I don't think you need to use the broker. Who are some good brokers to consider? This is another question. So great. I put together some brokers that you might want to consider. Okay. So in no particular order, here are some brokers. I know all of these guys really well. I have worked or done deals with many of these guys. There are many other brokers out there. Okay. This is by no means an all-encompassing list. These are just people that I have personal experience with. And I think they're good. They all have their little bit different ways of working. They all have their different contacts of like different kinds of things. What % is reasonable for a broker? So thank you for the question, Steve, because It's a good question. And unfortunately, there's not like one simple answer because it's a little bit of what's the broker doing for you. And so like real estate agent, it used to be like 6% because, they did all this stuff now, but it's like, hey, if I'm just using a real estate agent to only view houses, like I need them to get me to in the view houses, I'm going to pay them less than if they're like doing the contracts and doing the negotiating and doing all that kind of stuff. So same kind of things with brokers is the less work you have them do, the less you pay them. The more work you have them do, the more that you will pay them. So I would, 10% is probably like that, probably full package price, if you will, if like they're kind of doing everything. And I'm sure there's even some, so don't say that as I'm price quoting for them, but a typical package, might be around 10%, but it just really depends on the value that the broker is bringing to the deal. Are they scrutinizing the financials? Like I love brokers who like ask the hard questions on financials. And some brokers are better at that than others. Some brokers would be like, well, these are the financials they submitted. Like we don't evaluate them. We just pass them along. And so then I have to do my own, really financial like detective work. So that would be probably a reasonable expectation. If they're doing most of the work is 10%, somewhere around there. Obviously it can be a lot less. Might even be more, probably doubtful. Out there. So what to do if I just want to sell my licenses and not RX files? I'm not sure how to answer that question because the files have to go somewhere. So, I mean, if you just want to give away your files, then you would just give them away and then you could sell your licenses. But you can't keep the RX files and just close the business. Like the files have to go somewhere. So I'm not quite sure I understood that question, but I mean, you could sell your licenses and contracts, and like if your friend owns a pharmacy and you want to just give him your files, I wouldn't recommend that. I mean, they're worth something. So not sure on that. Who to contact for chains? So every chain has an acquisition department. Kroger lately with some of my close friends that have sold some pharmacies to chains. Kroger's been like one of the higher offers or better offers. But every chain out there has an acquisition department. So just reach out to the acquisition department. There's somebody that's assigned to your area, and then, they'll contact you and go through all that. So, all right. Do I need a lawyer when I buy or sell a pharmacy? So this is really another great question because it's like, obviously buying and selling a pharmacy has to deal with like contracts and agreements and like, do I need a lawyer to like review all of this? And, the answer really is no, you don't really need a lawyer. And it also depends on your level of comfortability. Like I have a really high comfortability level reading contracts and understanding agreements. I probably in my sister life in a mirror universe, I am a lawyer. Like I like that stuff. So I have a really personal high comfortability level with that. And if you don't, you're like, oh my God, reading the contract gives me, breakout sweat and gives me anxiety, then you might want a lawyer. And what do you need a lawyer for? So lawyers are to protect yourself, make sure the agreements are sound, hold the other party to say what they're going to do, protect you in case something goes wrong. And so do you need a quote unquote pharmacy lawyer? I definitely do not think you need a pharmacy specialty lawyer for buying or selling a pharmacy. There are certainly things that you need a pharmacy specific lawyer for, like audits and, some of those kinds of things. This is really more of a business lawyer. So you're looking for somebody that does business contracting, business deals, and really you could pay them for a couple of hours. Now, if they're drafting up contracts and drafting up things like that, obviously you're going to pay them a little bit more than if they're just reviewing. Hey, I need somebody to review this to look out for me. And so there's lots of different ways. Again, just like with brokers, they can do more work or they can do less work. But my last many, many deals of buying and selling a pharmacy, I have not used a lawyer because I have familiarity and comfortability with looking at those kinds of things. And, if it was my very first time, I'm trying to think when I did use a lawyer, probably many, many years ago. I don't even remember. I'm sure I did. I don't even recall. I'm sure there was probably some legal guidance in there somewhere. But just your comfortability. It's your very first deal, buying a very first pharmacy. You know, you've never drawn up something like this. You've never read documents like this. Buy a lawyer. Pay for their time. Go through all the documents. Have them teach you. You know, have them help you understand what these terms mean. Have you, you know, like absolutely a-okay. And you can just you know, pay them their hourly rate. There's some business lawyers that, you know, sell kind of like packages, you know, kind of thing. So there's a lot of options. It doesn't need to cost you tens of thousands of dollars for a lawyer, I guess is what I'm saying. So no, you don't need one. Yes, you might want one, and there's nothing wrong with using one. Just really understand what they're there for, is to help make sure you're protected. Like if, you know, the seller is obligated to you know, transfer bank accounts, you know, and they don't transfer bank accounts by the date, like, you know, what is the repercussions and those kinds of things. Like you just really want to understand what a lawyer's for, and you'll probably understand that there's actually not a whole lot of stuff that they really need to do in their lawyer work, but it's always nice to have that comfortability cloak, if you will, on there. So nothing wrong with hiring a lawyer, but no, you don't absolutely need one. All right, let's see. I got a question here. Can you send a template for a pharmacy contract? I don't have a template for a pharmacy contract. Seems weird. Honestly, these days for most contracts, I use ChatGPT. Just gonna throw that out there. I use ChatGPT for all of my service agreements. I use ChatGPT for my intend to purchase, letter of intent is what they're called. Like the actual contract to sell a pharmacy is actually not that complicated. Especially depending on how you do it. Now, I probably would, if you ever are going to be buying somebody's corporation or like stock sale rather than an asset sale. So a stock sale, if I don't recommend it, generally speaking, but if there is some reason you're going to do a stock sale, I would probably very much involve a lawyer, because that's a lot more risk and a lot more things could go wrong with that. But when you do an asset sale, it's very much like buying a car. It's just one person has a car. Here's the VIN number for that car. Here's the description of the car. And as of this date, you now own the car. Here's what I sold it for. And, you know, here's the money transfer, like descriptions. Like it's an asset. When you're doing an asset sale, it's very much just like buying other stuff that you buy. So it's like, here's the pharmacy business. Here's the description of the business. It contains, you know, all the prescriptions. It contains the fixtures. It contains the computers, you know, everything listed here. And here's the price that it's being sold for. And, you know, we're transferring, you know, that sale. So that's why it's actually it's far less complicated than you probably what you think. But it's just like buying anything else that you own. So how would you sell a car? How would you sell a house? You know, those kinds of things, whatnot. So what happens to existing insurance contracts with a stock sale compared to an asset sale? So a stock sale is like you are taking ownership of the company. So really nothing changes. And that's where there can be some use cases to do I say stock sale, obviously depending on the entity of the corporation, it may not be a stock sale, but you're basically buying the corporation and taking over the corporation, or the entity. And there might be some use cases, like if you have like an amazing contract that, you know, they're not renewing, they're not redoing, and it's only available, you know, if you stay in existence with that corporation. Those are kind of like some of the reasons why you might take over the corporation, and do it that way. With an asset sale, you're not actually really buying the contracts. I'll just be buying contracts separately with no business. You usually do like a stock sale. That's how you get in and you assimilate those contracts. When you're buying a regular retail pharmacy that has business and you're buying the files, you're actually not buying the contracts, but you are buying the permission to use the contracts. Because when you buy a pharmacy, I buy a retail pharmacy, they're doing 200 scripts a day, they have contracts, they have licenses. On day one, I don't have my license, I don't have my own contracts. So you get a power of attorney, what's called, and basically the old person, the old owner, gives you permission to use and operate under their contracts. And so until you get all your own. So you basically operate under the old business until you get all your new contracts and your new licenses under the new business. So hopefully that explains a little bit on what happens to the contracts there. If I just totally confused you, let me know, and I'll try to re-explain. All right. Okay. Every year, I increase my expenses at the end of the year to save on taxes. If I want a higher value for my pharmacy, should I not do this? So this was a really interesting question because this goes into accounting practices. What are you expensing? What are you buying to reduce that, and whatnot? So let's start off. He didn't say this question. I did get several versions of this question that says I increased my inventory at the end of the year to save on taxes, which that tells me that you're not doing proper accounting, because purchasing inventory is not an expense until you dispense it. It's just a movement from cash to bottles on your shelf on your balance sheet. So if you buy an extra 100 grand of inventory and you count that as an expense, you're doing accounting wrong, and your bookkeeper is doing accounting wrong. So this particular question just said expenses. So here, and you're like, wait a minute, what's working and how does this save taxes? Like, let me know. So getting into a little bit of accounting here is, obviously, if you have more expenses, doesn't matter when they're done, but anytime through the fiscal year, you have less net income. And so therefore you might have less taxes, whether that income passes through to your personal taxes or you have the type of entity where the entity is taxed. The less net income you have, the less taxes you might pay. And if you watched part 1, if you have less net income, your pharmacy is worth less. However, if I pay, I'm going to give some scenarios here. So it's December 31st, and I want to decrease my net profit this year because I want to pay less taxes. So let's say I pay my January rent early. That way I move January expenses into December expenses, and I reduce my, net profit by $3,000, which is my rent, and therefore I will pay less taxes. You absolutely could be doing that. However, the next year, you're down 1 month of expenses, so you have less expenses for the next year, which prompts you to have to somehow prepay expenses to kind of make up for it that year. And if you just keep doing this year after year after year, you're actually really not getting any benefit. You've just moved. You got the one-time benefit of moving some extra expenses into the 1 year, but every year after that, you're just continuing to pay the expenses. So it's not necessarily a good strategy for lowering taxes. There are maybe some better strategies. The better time to use that strategy is use it sometimes and not use it some. If you have a really good year, there are some pharmacies that kicked freaking ass during COVID, or maybe this year they've done really, really well because they've sold a bunch of GLP-1s, and you're like, I have way more profit this year than I was expecting. Then that might be a year where let's look at some prepaying some expenses. Can I pay my rent for a year? Or, should I go buy a car? Or, those kinds of things. Because you're trying to offset some unexpected profit, that might be good to do those kinds of things. But just know, if they're fixed expenses like rent, and if you move 2025 expenses into 2024, 2025 isn't going to have those expenses, and you're going to have more profit in 2025. But maybe you don't expect to sell as many GLP-1s, or maybe you don't expect to, have the COVID windfall that you did. And so that might be okay to move some of those expenses. This is where working with a good accountant is worth their weight in gold. And a good accountant should more than make up their expenses, what they cost, when you start to understand these kinds of things of how it affects it. So should I not do this? Now, if they're legitimate expenses for the business, it honestly really doesn't matter because it's going to wash out year over year. If these are extra expenses, some yaya expenses, we're taking the family to Walt Disney trip and counting it as an employee benefit expenses. Those are added back when we talked in the first webinar about add backs, things that aren't necessary expenses that the new owner would experience. You can add back those expenses as add backs. So let's say you buy a brand new Lincoln Navigator Black Label as a company car at the end of the year to reduce your expenses, or, like I've done in the past, we've bought vehicles and things like that. you can actually add those back. So legitimate expense, legitimate business expense, you're using it for business, all those kinds of things. But the new owner isn't necessarily going to have that expense. You can actually add it back as an add back to your net profit. So it really isn't impacting your net profit at all and shouldn't impact the valuation of your pharmacy. So hopefully that makes some sense. I had some questions come in. Wouldn't that be true about inventory if somebody's using the cash method? No, because buying inventory is never an expense. It's a cost of goods sold, and you don't experience that cost of goods sold. That's why it's called cost of goods sold until you sell the thing. It just transfers from cash to inventory on the balance sheet. And if you'll notice, inventory never shows up on your profit and loss until it's cost of goods sold. You have to sell the thing in order to take it as an expense. Whether you're accrual or cash basis, that doesn't matter. So, so no, hopefully that answer. It doesn't matter if you're cash or accrual. Buying inventory does not change your assets. You're just changing one asset from cash to inventory. That's why I always say when you're managing inventory, it's important that you imagine all those little bottles as stacks of cash on your shelf, because that's what it is. It's cash. It's like exchanging $1 for 4 quarters. Like you have 4 quarters over here. They weigh more, they clink around, they make sounds. And over here it's $1. It's the same thing, but they look different. Same kind of thing with cash and inventory. You have cash and you have inventory. So somebody's saying, didn't the tax cubs allow you to expense your inventory as long as you're 25? Yes, but that's a one-time thing. You expense your inventory as a one-time change, as long as you're underneath that 25 million sales for everything in the entity. Ongoing, it's still cost of goods sold. But that one time, that one benefit, and for those of you who have like, what the heck is he talking about? There was part of the tax law changes. Normally, inventory is not expensible, as I just explained. It's just exchanging $1 for 4 quarters. You didn't actually lose any money, so therefore there is no expense. You just changed the form that the money shows up in. There is a benefit if you have a good tax person and they understand the implications. That looking at your corporation, looking at your entity, if you have certain sales, if you switch to a certain counting method, that you can do a one-time write-off of your inventory when you make these changes. And that can be a huge windfall of tax savings, because normally pharmacies can't write off inventory. Well, it's not just for pharmacies, it's for businesses. But normally businesses can't write off their inventory. But if you do this one thing and you change and you obviously qualify, you get the one-time write-off of your inventory. So you don't get to write it off every year, unfortunately, but it's a one-time write-off. So hopefully that explains that. And I will say again, I am not an accountant and I do not play one on TV. This is just my understanding of the tax law and spending a lot of money on accountants myself. So take everything I say with, a grain of salt. Of go talk to somebody who's actually a licensed CPA, but that is my understanding. So anyways, if you increase your expenses to lower your taxes, normally that's not going to impact your business, because you're either just moving normal expenses forward, or you'll have some extra yaya expenses that'll just come back in add backs. So it should impact your valuation of your pharmacy. So you do what your accountant says, which is good for you based on your sales and performance and profitability from year to year, and should not affect your valuation, is the short answer to that question after my very long-winded answer. All right. So what are best ways to make a pharmacy more attractive to a buyer? So I had some personal questions that are like, for a buyer like you, how can I make my pharmacy more attractive? So I will say I'm like more of an investment buyer, which is different than somebody who's looking to like own or operate a pharmacy. So I'm going to go through and answer these questions from both kind of perspectives. So increasing your pharmacy attractiveness. If you want somebody like me to be like, oh my gosh, I want to buy your pharmacy, like these 3 pharmacies that I'm looking at and buying, then these are the things that are important for somebody like me that's coming from like an investor mindset. One, it's all about the staff. All right. I don't want to have to hire a bunch of staff. I don't want to have to fire a bunch of staff. Like if you've got good staff, like that is like one of the first questions I ask, like, is the staff good? So it's all about the staff. Number 2, as an investor, I'm looking for a fully staffed pharmacy where the owner does not have to work the bench. There has been some great opportunities that I have let pass me by because I would have had to go hire a full-time pharmacist, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just, I personally don't have time to go do that. I want something that's a little more turnkey. So I'm looking at pharmacies who either have a pharmacy manager or a pharmacist that it's fully staffed, where I don't have to go hire somebody. Now, I might want to, like I might want to replace people or I want to hire staff, but I don't have to in order to buy it and take over. So being fully staffed from an investor standpoint is very, very important. Having a building involved or property as part of the deal is nice, but certainly not required. Happy to, I mean, two of the pharmacies I'm looking at buying right now do not come with property, but one of them does. And so nice, but not required. I do look at rent, and we do look at rent for less than $3,000 a month. And some of you might be going, $3,000 a month, that, and some of you would be like, I would love $3,000 a month. So my first pharmacy in California, our rent was $9,000 a month. So I get you on that. Some of our pharmacies in some rural areas, our rent is like $1,000 a month. But usually, like, I'm looking for rent less than $3,000 a month, because just learned over experience that that's easy to manage. It's not such a big hit to the financials that I can't make it work. And so typically it's just a guideline. And I actually prefer, as an investor, an underperforming store, because I know I'll be able to create value and profit coming in with my, all the stuff that we teach in Pharmacy Badass University. Like, I'll be able to come in and do some things that will then actually make it much more profitable. So if you're a fantastic pharmacy and you are like killing it and earning every penny of profit out of that pharmacy, I probably don't want to buy you, because there's really nothing in it for me. Like, if you've already optimized everything. So what if you're a high performing pharmacy, you're probably going to turn it over to an owner operator, somebody who already wants all the shit done. I'm kind of like the real estate person that comes in and rehabs, because that's where I get my profit. If it's already a pristine, brand new real estate build, like, there's really not much I can do. So I actually prefer underperforming stores, because that's where I get to make my profit by making them better performing stores. So I also do it for an owner operator. So if you're looking to, sell it to somebody who maybe wants to own their pharmacy, work the bench, do all those kinds of things, it's still all about staff. Okay. So staff doesn't matter for either one. You got to have a good staff. So if you have drama problems, if you have crappy employees that, call in every other day, like, that's the number one thing. Doesn't matter who you're selling to, fix that problem, because nobody wants to inherit your staff headaches. All right. So it's all about the staff. For owner operators, they're looking for stable business, good reputation, probably recent growth in volume. You're capturing more people just in your community, kind of by osmosis, from being stable and having a good reputation. Also, owner operators are generally looking for the old owner is willing to transition. Maybe they're willing to stay on for 3 months or 6 months. Maybe they're willing to give public endorsements, like, hey, I personally handpicked, this new owner to take over my 50-year pharmacy. Those kinds of things. Those kinds of things are important, because there's an owner operator is going to be the new face of the pharmacy, if you will. And so having that blessing from the old owner is very, very important. Generally speaking, owner operators, they don't want to inherit headaches. That's the big thing. Like, as an investor, I'm willing to inherit some headaches, because I know how to fix the headaches and then turn those headaches into profit. New owner operators, this is probably their first pharmacy, maybe second pharmacy. They're looking for a full-time kind of quote unquote job that makes them extra money. So generally, having newer computers, having an inventory that's under control, having a good location, those are things that are important for owner operators that aren't necessarily as important from coming from an investor standpoint. So just kind of wanted to give you some dichotomy there of different ways to look at it. All right, I had a ton of questions about care, and I had mentioned in part one, like, care could double the value of the pharmacy, kind of thing. Oh, here's a great question. How do you get a real feeling on if the staff is good and willing to stay? Talking to the owner, their body language when they talk about their staff is number one. You can read a lot into that. sometimes social media posts, like is like there's staff in there, like they're commenting, those kinds of things. Obviously, when you get to the point when you're buying and selling and part of the vetting process is to possibly talk with the staff. I always try to secret shop the pharmacies I look at, where they obviously, before they know who I am, I don't wear my pharmacy badass t-shirt, anything like that. And I just go in and, hey, I didn't see the Delsum on the shelf, can you show me the Delsum, or, whatever. And I just kind of look at the pharmacy and those kinds of things. But definitely part of the vetting process before your deal is done, I meet the staff and I talk to the staff, and you obviously get some feedback that way. But generally speaking, looking at the payroll, are people underpaid? Are they overpaid? Is there a bunch of overtime? Is somebody full-time, but they only get, 34 hours every week because they're late every day? There's some ways that you can kind of figure out some of that information before you get to the point of meeting the staff, because obviously, for lots of reasons and lots of very good reasons, owners who are selling don't want to tell their staff. The other thing is, I always ask the owner, like, who is I must have, I cannot operate this pharmacy if they are not continuing to be employed. Like, I always ask, like, who are the absolute key employees? Sometimes they literally answer like everybody's so critical, couldn't imagine, this. Sometimes they're like, oh, Susie, like Susie's the one that matters. And when we've bought pharmacies, not every pharmacy, but in some pharmacies, we do bonuses. We do retention bonuses for the employees. If they really truly are key employees, and after we go through the vetting process and we realize that they truly are key employees, we will do some retention bonuses in order to help make that transition time better. So there's a couple ways to kind of get that real feeling. Yes, you're always a little bit of rolling the dice, but I think after that, after getting some feedback from the owners, after looking at payroll, after looking at some things, social media, after talking to the employees, you can get a pretty good accurate gut check on that. So hopefully that helps there, Joe. All right. I'll answer that question. Possible evaluate the pharmacy. Talk to me at another time after the Zoom. I'll maybe address that one at the end there, Ken. All right. Okay. So I had lots of questions about care and how, WTF, how can really care double my value? So I wanted to address that, and specifically tell you, because I do think this might be a really good opportunity and a good strategy for those of you that are like, I'm 3 to 5 weeks, like I'm going to be ready to tap out. And so this is an option that surely, if you're ready to sell today, this is not an option for you. But if you're, if you have a little bit of a short timeline, short in business, like 3 to 5 years, then this might be an option for you. And so, and it might be worth waiting for if you once I explain and kind of understand how it works, they really can double or more your value. So yes, care could do that. And here's how. So let's talk about the how. So more stores automatically mean a bigger X. So when we talked about in part one, your X, your multiplication factor, whether you're multiplying by prescriptions, you're multiplying by your net operating profit, like whatever the multiplier is, the X means the multiplier. So more stores automatically mean a bigger X. So if you're selling, one pharmacy, or you're selling 100 pharmacies, the 100 pharmacies is automatically going to be worth more, because when PE or VC, and sorry, I'm using acronyms, private equity, venture capital, or big corporations are in acquisition mode. When they're looking to buy, they generally want the shortest line to the largest increase in market share. They don't want to do it's a lot of work to do deals, right? Like it's time and effort. So they don't want to do 100 deals to get one store in each deal. They want to do one deal that's 100 stores. And so when you offer up a larger piece of the pie, you get more of a premium for that. And this is not just in pharmacy. This is not a pharmacy thing. This is a business thing. So there are many people out there that their sole way they get rich is they buy up a bunch of businesses in the same vertical, repackage them, and then resell them as a bigger package. So this happens with chiropractors. It happens with dry cleaners. It happens with car washes, where somebody will go around and acquire and do the work of 100 deals, getting one store at a time. Once they have 100, then they turn around to PE or VC or corporations and say, hey, I know a big part of this market share and I'm willing to send it to you. They might have bought all of theirs at 2X, And now that they got 100 of them, they can sell them at 5x. And so that's how they make their money, is by this repackaging and reselling. So that's kind of what Care is doing, in the sense of bringing together a group of pharmacies that will all sell together. And that means you get a bigger X. Okay. So for example, this is just an example. I am not making any financial promises. Let's say you have one store, one store sells for 3x. Great. We went over that in part 1. If you have 100 stores, regardless of kind of like how well they perform or anything, your X is automatically a 5. Like, you're automatically at a higher X because they're purchasing more market share. If you have 500 stores, your X might be at an 8, just automatically, before any extra evaluation for performance or whatnot is added in. And so just by being bigger, you get more X's. And so that's one way how Care is going to do this. So, all right. How again? Another how. All right. Care is the way that I understand Care, and like I had kind of hard time kind of getting what they were doing at first, but so I call it the almost franchise system. All right. So a lot of what they do, if you're familiar with the franchise, when you buy a franchise, I've owned franchises, not in the pharmacy space, but in other business verticals. Yes, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I have a problem. I'm not looking to fix it because it's made me money. So we'll keep being an entrepreneurial addict. But when you buy a franchise, like, a lot of things are already figured out for you. Like, you don't have to figure out everything because they've already figured it out. This is the way you do this. This is the way you do this. This is the way you do this. And so kind of makes it easier to own a franchise. Care is not a franchise, but I call it the almost franchise system, because what they do is they are operationally systematizing a lot of things in your pharmacy. You're going to be able to buy from all of their wholesalers. And you're looking for a cash discount card, they got a cash discount card. You're looking for a telehealth network, they got a telehealth network. Like, they've kind of got some things systematized. So it's kind of like getting into a franchise system. So it's going to take a lot of that operational burden and admin burden off of you, because one of the ways that franchises are profitable is everything is the same. So there's less time spent on decision making. There's more time spent on execution. And so that's really what Care is doing in terms of helping to improve your operational efficiency. So you get your multiple of X being a part of a big group, but then the other part of that equation is your operational profitability. So they're going to help increase your operational profitability by giving you access to all of their systems. And so that's kind of the other way you can think of how Care is boosting that formula. So more operational profit equals more profit each year, and a bigger number to multiply the X by. So you got a bigger X and you got a bigger number to multiply by, thereby you are going to have a bigger exit, more money on the exit. So one of my favorite quotes, I don't ever know whoever said this quote, but it's repeated a lot in business, but a big number multiplied by a little number is still a big number. So you get to do that. So all right, how? Here's just some math. Okay. I always like to give numbers instead of just woo woo. Here's some, fuzzy things. So here's some examples. Again, just examples. Old operational profit was $120,000 a year multiplied by 3.5. You got paid $420,000 for your pharmacy. Now, with Care, maybe your operational profit has, doubled. So now you're at $250,000 and you get a 5X instead of a 3.5X. So small increase on the X. Now, all of a sudden, with just those small increases, you're now paid $1.25 million for your pharmacy. So you can see how making small changes to these numbers multiplied has a very big difference in the outcome of your pharmacy. And so that's why I think this is very important for that. You might want to consider Care as a way if you're looking to sell in the next 3 to 5 years. Because I really think there is a very tangible possibility that you're going to be doubling or mooring, is that a word? Doubling or more your individual store, how much you get for your store when you join this group like that. So 3 times increase in store valuation is what that did. You went from 420, to this. What does it mean to join Care? So I had lots of questions where you're like, hey, I talked to Care, but I didn't really understand. I get it. It is kind of confusing to understand what they're saying. They've gotten much better at speaking it. So one, you are not selling your pharmacy to Care. You still own and operate your pharmacy. You have not sold your pharmacy. You sign a letter of intent that you will sell your pharmacy when they reach the critical mass in order to increase that X value. So you do sign a letter of intent, like it's like, hey, you make the call in 3 years that, hey, we're ready to sell, like you're going to sell, be a part of the group. Now, does that letter of intent mean like there's no way, no how you can back out? No, I don't think so. Like I've read the letter of intent, like I don't think it's ironclad, like that kind of thing. But it's a commitment, you know, you're engaged. All right. You're not married yet, but you're engaged, you know. The date may not be set, but you're engaged. All right. CareX will help you improve your operations and profitability in the meantime. So just like obviously if you were to join Pharmacy Badass University, we help you make the pharmacy awesome. They're doing some different things with like the operational side so that you get more profit in the meantime. So, you know, some of you may be not paying yourself, you may not be taking out that much profit. You don't want to wait 3 to 5 years for, you know, the exit, which I don't think you should. You should be taking out profit in your pharmacy, you know, every year. And so they will help you do that in the meantime through their operations and profitability improvements. Basically, you have a partner in your pharmacy that's going to share all of that like CEO burdens of, you know, well, which company do I buy my vials from? Well, gee, I don't have to spend any more time on that because now I'm a part of Care and Care has the contract with this vial company and now I don't have to make that decision. So kind of thing. So you're saving some, I think some mental burden as well, because some decisions are already kind of laid out for you. So you're not selling your pharmacy to Care. You're still a part of them. So how do you join Care? First of all, call and chat with them. Make sure you get all your questions answered. And if you need any help, like on this, like I said, it took me a while to kind of realize what they were doing. Now I'm on board. Obviously, I'm talking about them. None of my pharmacies right now are not a part of Care because I don't plan on selling them short term. I typically buy pharmacies long term. But if that ever changes, I would probably definitely do this. Just giving you my personal opinion, not not anything. So like, do you really want to be planning for your pharmacy exit in a few years? Like I said, this is like an engagement. Not that engagements can't be broken, but is that something you really want to do? Or do you just want a better pharmacy? Like I obviously talked with a lot of pharmacy owners and a lot of the people who joined Pharmacy Badass University, like this, if they would keep their pharmacy for another 20 years if it just wasn't such a pain in the ass and they actually made money. Well, that's what we do. We make it not a pain in the ass and help you make money. So like check with yourself. Is it really what you want to do to, exit your pharmacy? I will say that Care has this special going for the first 200 members that you get a guaranteed 3X. So, your multiple and a 40% extra for the first 200 member pharmacies. So their goal is to get to 500 or more pharmacies. And they will guarantee the first 200 that you will get a 3X evaluation plus 40%. So they're basically guaranteeing you 40% over what I would say market value is now, because market value is a 3X. And so to get those commitments to join that group. So Ken just asked, do you only join Care if you plan on selling? Yes. Do not join Care if you don't plan on selling. If you just want a better ass pharmacy and kick ass and make a lot of money, join Pharmacy Badass University. Actually, a lot of the Care pharmacies are Pharmacy Badass University members because we do different things to help improve that profitability. Obviously, we're not creating a group that's going to sell. I actually want pharmacy owners to own their pharmacies for decades to come and then sell it to the next pharmacy owner who's going to own it for decades to come. But if you are planning on selling and you don't mind selling to a private equity or a venture capital or those kinds of things, they do have this really awesome special. They're basically guaranteeing you a 40% upside if you're one of the first 200 member pharmacies. I want to say they've chewed through about half of that 200 in terms of of people that have joined. So obviously I'm not Care. I'm just speaking as somebody who knows about them. And so that is kind of a cool perk. If you really do plan on selling, do not join them though if you do not plan on selling. You literally sign a document that says, I plan on selling. So all right. Let me see before we go on. Oh, let me take a drink of water real quick and let me check questions. Okay, so if you missed part one, we will send part one recording out with this recording. So no worries. CareRx, we will send you the link to CareRx in the email as well. What telehealth network do they use? It depends for what services. So they have a couple of things. So Ola Digital, which is what I use for my weight loss clinic, is one of them. My Health Bio is another one that they kind of work differently. So Ola Digital is like if you own your own clinic and you want a telehealth option, like that's like what that's for. My Health Bio is like for pharmacies to just refer their patients. They take care of everything. They see the patient. They send the prescriptions. You know, they could send the prescriptions to you if you want to fill them, those kinds of things. And then you just get like basically a fee for, you know, referring patients. So it depends what use of telehealth. So there's a couple of options that I know that they use. Because we've promoted a lot of those networks. Same too. My Physician 360, use that too. So again, it just kind of depends what purpose for the telehealth. So there's a couple of options there. All right. Really quick, would be remiss if I didn't obviously talk about my own services, like here at Pharmacy Badass University. If you want more patient impact, more financial freedom, and more security in your future for you, your patients, and your staff, like that's what we're here for. We do it in 4 steps. We focus on reversing poor cash flow, building solutions, scaling those systems for continuously profitable pharmacy, and then of course diversifying revenue streams, which is where let's see, shameless plug. This is what inside the membership looks like. We have a pharmacy profit matrix. We have our dashboard of all of our goodies and our menu and all those kinds of stuff. A lot of people are like, what the heck does membership look like? It kind of looks like this. And we have lots of things in there. Lastly, I want to tell you guys, because you guys are on this webinar and it is in 36 hours, our summit, Pharmacy Profit Summit, that's happening in March. I know a couple of you on here have spoke on there, like Sam, some others. It's an awesome conference. It's the best, if I do say so myself. I might be a little biased. We got lots of great topics happening in 2025, medical billing, easy employee training, AI and marketing. We got PSAO analytics, direct contracting, like we got it, dude. But prices are increasing on November 1st. So if you have not bought your ticket yet and you want to come to this, which if you're a pharmacy owner, I don't know why you wouldn't come to this. Just saying. Hussam says yes, his favorite conference every year. Prices are increasing. I only have to increase the prices because I have to pay the dang people more. I'd rather not pay them more, and I'd rather everybody just buy their dang ticket today, pay me less, you save money. I don't have to pay the people as much. So I take no joy in increasing ticket prices. So if you know you want to go, buy your tickets today, pharmacyprofitsummit.com. If you are a member of Pharmacy Badass University, make sure you buy your ticket from inside the membership because you all get discounts because you're members. So go there. So I think there was another questions that came in about care. Something about you have to change your pharmacy software. So in the beginning, kind of like I said, franchise-like, one of those franchise-like things was to change your PMS system. They do not require you to change your PMS system. They will help you do that. Like if you hate your PMS system or it's not doing anything for you, they will facilitate that, but they are not requiring you to change your PMS system anymore. So hopefully that answers that question. Have I signed up for care in my stores? No, because I don't plan on selling my pharmacies in 3 to 5 years. As I said before, if that plan ever changes and I, want to, then I most definitely would. But I'm actually acquiring pharmacies, like I'm buying pharmacies. So I don't have any plan on selling my pharmacies in the next 3 to 5 years. Would RX be helpful to would CareRx be helpful to a new pharmacy? Well, if you want to sell in 3 years, it might be, yes. If you're starting a new pharmacy, I would hope that you're not starting it in the hopes of just turning around and selling it 3 years, because let me tell you, the first 3 years are the hardest. After that, it gets way easier. So in general, I might say no, because you're not going to do all this work just to sell it in 3 years. Like to me, that would make no sense. So you'd be better off joining Pharmacy Badass University, and that way you don't make any mistakes and you have a kick-ass pharmacy. All right. let's see, what PMS system does, honestly, I don't know. I think it's like their system. I could be wrong. So call care and ask them what PMS system they recommend. So I don't know the answer to that question. And then going back to oh, Stephen's on here. They have their own PMS system. That's what I thought, but I wasn't 100%. Let's see. Ken asked if so a couple people have asked if I can help evaluate pharmacies, like if I can be hired. One, that's not one of the things that I do, in the sense of like, that's not my job. Like, I don't want to charge people for that. There's brokers and stuff that I shared that can happily do that for you. For my inner circle members, I definitely do that. I work very closely with our inner circle members to do that. I would probably consider maybe doing that for our unlimited members. It's just, you know, my time's limited and I have to share it appropriately. And frankly, why pay me when you can go to the brokers and they probably do it for free, or go to the bank and they probably do that for free, or just watch part one and you can figure it out. So I only like charging money for people for things that like you can't go find somewhere else for cheaper or for free. So that's what I would recommend. Let's see. All right, I think that's it, everybody. I'm going to be really respectful of your time and get you out of here. I know we're like 1 minute over. So hopefully I answered all your questions. If not, feel free to message me. And if I missed something, happy to answer questions for you. Get your summit tickets before prices go up. We have like 36 hours before prices go up. So get your summit ticket. And if you just want a badass pharmacy that's fun to own and makes lots of money, join Pharmacy Badass University. We are starting a new group support call next month for cash revenue. We obviously have lots of things that's going on in the membership, but a ton of our members are looking at growing cash revenue streams. And so they're actually going to be hosted by me. So if you want to learn more from me, it's going to be available to all of our Essentials members and up, and we're going to help you grow and make lots of money from cash prescriptions. So that is it. I will let you all go, and adios, everybody. Bye-bye.